In the early morning hours of July 5th, 2001, a quiet street in the city of Moore Park, California, became the center of a mystery that would soon shock an entire community. The 4th of July celebrations had just ended, and most people were asleep after a long night of fireworks and parties. But while the town settled into silence, something unspeakable had already taken place. At approximately 4 a.m., a private security guard was patrolling a commercial area of Moore Park, keeping watch over local businesses. As he drove along an empty stretch of road, he heard several sharp popping sounds coming from a nearby street. Given the holiday, he assumed they were fireworks. Still, the sounds unsettled him, and he decided to investigate. As he turned the corner, he saw a car sitting awkwardly in the middle of the road. The engine was running. The headlights were on. The windshield wipers moved back and forth in a steady rhythm. The driver's door was wide open, yet no one was inside. The scene felt wrong. The guard stepped out of his vehicle and approached. One woman's flip-flop lay on the asphalt, while the other was wedged beneath the driver's seat. Inside the car, dark red stains were splattered across the interior. The moment he realized it was blood, he backed away and called the police. Officers arrived within minutes and immediately secured the area. Upon closer inspection, they found multiple bullet holes across the windshield, and the driver's side window had been completely shattered. Shell casings were scattered nearby. Ballistics experts would later confirm that the shots were fired from an AK-47 assault rifle, an alarming discovery in a suburban city like Moore Park. Despite the large amount of blood inside the vehicle, investigators noticed something deeply troubling. There was not a single drop of blood outside the car. This suggested that the driver had not exited on her own. Whoever fired the shots had likely taken her from the scene. The car was quickly identified as a rental vehicle registered to a 20-year-old woman named Megan Barroso. Megan Barroso was born on March 15, 1981, in Camarillo, California. When she was young, her parents separated and she went on to live with her mother, though her father remained actively involved in her life. As a child, Megan discovered a passion for dance, something that brought her confidence and joy. It became a defining part of who she was. During her teenage years, her mother lost her job at a local hospital, forcing them to relocate to the small town of Templeton, several hours away. The move was difficult for Megan. She had to leave behind her school, her friends, and the familiar life she loved. Still, she adapted and graduated from high school. After graduation, Megan decided to return closer to home. She rented a small apartment in Moore Park, enrolled in a local community college, and found work as an assistant in the purchasing department at a clothing manufacturing company. She planned to transfer to a university in the future, though she had not yet decided what she wanted to study. Those who knew Megan described her as kind, responsible, and easygoing. She avoided conflict and had no known enemies. She was not involved in any troubled relationships. Around this time, her father had recently remarried and welcomed a newborn son, and Megan made every effort to visit and spend time with her growing family. Her life appeared stable, full of promise, and moving in a positive direction. On July 4th, 2001, Megan made plans to spend the entire day celebrating Independence Day with friends. She began the afternoon at her friend Lindsay's house, where a family barbecue was taking place. The atmosphere was relaxed, filled with laughter, food, and conversation. As evening approached, the group was invited to a beach party in a nearby town. Megan left her car at Lindsay's house, and friends drove them to the gathering. They spent hours socializing and watching fireworks light up the night sky. Later, they stopped by another friend's house before finally returning to Lindsay's around 2 a.m. Knowing Megan had work early the next morning, Lindsay offered her a place to stay the night. The drive back to Megan's apartment would take time, and it was already late. Megan politely declined. She wanted to go home and rest in her own bed. As the two hugged goodbye, Megan accidentally knocked her purse to the ground, spilling its contents across the driveway. They crouched down together to gather everything. In the confusion, Megan mistakenly picked up Lindsay's cell phone instead of her own. Only minutes after Megan drove away, Lindsay realized her phone was missing. She called her number from the house phone and Megan answered. Realizing the mistake, Megan turned her car around, returned to Lindsay's house, dropped off the phone, and then drove away once again. It was a small, ordinary moment, one that would later haunt everyone involved. Sometime between 3 o'clock and 4 a.m., as Megan drove alone through Moore Park, another vehicle sideswiped her car from the driver's side. Data later recovered from the vehicle indicated that Megan accelerated sharply, attempting to escape. Investigators believe the attacker sped ahead and disappeared from view. Megan eventually came to a stop at a traffic light, possibly believing the threat had passed. But the danger was far from over. From a position just ahead of the intersection, the attacker opened fire. Several shots struck the windshield but initially missed Megan. She pressed the gas pedal again, desperately trying to flee. As her car passed the shooter, one final bullet was fired, striking Megan in the stomach. Wounded and losing control, Megan's car veered onto the median and came to a stop. Inside the vehicle, Megan reached for her purse, likely trying to retrieve her phone. Blood spattered the interior of the car. Before she could make a call for help, the attacker approached her vehicle. What happened next remained a mystery for weeks. Megan Barroso vanished into the darkness. Search dogs later traced Megan's scent from the car for only a short distance before it abruptly stopped, reinforcing the theory that she had been forcibly taken in another vehicle. Detectives contacted every hospital in the area, but Megan had not been admitted to any of them. There were no witnesses, no surveillance cameras, no foreign fingerprints inside the car. As news of the attack spread, fear gripped the community. A young woman had been shot and abducted on a quiet suburban street, and the person responsible was still at large. For investigators, the race against time had begun. In the days following Megan Barroso's disappearance, fear spread rapidly throughout Ventura County. News outlets warned residents that an armed attacker was potentially targeting women on the road. Police set up checkpoints, questioned drivers, and appealed to the public for any information, no matter how small. Hundreds of tips poured in, but most led nowhere. Detectives worked around the clock, retracing Megan's final movements and interviewing everyone who had seen her that night. Friends and family described her as cautious and level-headed. She did not take risks, did not associate with dangerous people, and had never mentioned feeling threatened. There were no suspicious phone calls, no troubling diary entries, and no signs that she believed she was being followed. Investigators briefly considered the possibility of a road rage incident that had spiraled out of control. However, the brutality of the attack, the use of an assault rifle, and the apparent abduction suggested something far more sinister. Whoever had taken Megan had come prepared. As search efforts expanded, officers scoured nearby hills, canyons, and riverbanks. Helicopters equipped with infrared cameras swept over rugged terrain. Search dogs combed the area repeatedly. Still, there was no sign of Megan. Days passed, and hope began to fade. Then, nearly 3 weeks later, the case took a dramatic and unexpected turn. On July 26, 2001, police in a neighboring town responded to a routine burglary report. A homeowner accused his neighbor, a 31-year-old man named Vincent Sanchez, of breaking into his house. Officers arrested Sanchez without incident. At the time, the burglary seemed entirely unrelated to Megan Barroso's disappearance. While in custody, Sanchez made a phone call to one of his roommates. He asked him to do him a favor: retrieve a bag he had thrown into a dumpster near the house and get rid of it. The roommate assumed the bag contained stolen property from the burglary and agreed to help. When he pulled the bag from the dumpster and opened it, he realized immediately that something was terribly wrong. Inside were videotapes. Curiosity quickly turned into horror as the roommate played one of them. The footage showed women tied up, blindfolded, and being sexually assaulted by a man wearing a ski mask. The attacker spoke calmly to his victims. The roommate recognized the voice instantly. It was Vincent Sanchez. Some of the videos had been filmed inside the very house they shared. Shaken and terrified, the roommate called the police. Officers recovered the bag and obtained a search warrant for Sanchez's room. What they found, confirmed their worst fears. Inside were knives, handcuffs, firearms, women's underwear, personal belongings, and dozens of photographs of women in explicit poses. Among the photos was one of Sanchez's long-term girlfriend. Investigators soon realized they were no longer dealing with a single crime. They were staring at the evidence of a serial sexual predator. As detectives attempted to identify the women in the videos, they brought in criminal profiler Sharon Hagan, who had already been tracking a series of sexual assaults in the region. She immediately recognized several of the victims. Over the years, more than a dozen women had reported eerily similar attacks, being stalked, abducted at knife point, sexually assaulted, and then released. Hagan became convinced that Vincent Sanchez was responsible for all of them. One case in particular stood out. Just days before Megan vanished, a 22-year-old woman named Donna had reported being kidnapped off the street by a man dressed in black. He had forced her into his vehicle, sexually assaulted her, taken her to a house, and then, shockingly, comforted her afterward before releasing her. Donna had given police a detailed description of her attacker. Investigators arranged a lineup. Without hesitation, Donna identified Vincent Sanchez. As detectives dug deeper into Sanchez's background, another critical detail emerged. One of Sanchez's roommates owned an AK-47 assault rifle, and Sanchez had easy access to it. When police examined the weapon, they noticed something missing: the rifle's cleaning rod. A matching rod had been found near Megan's abandoned car. The connection was undeniable. Officers returned to Sanchez's home and conducted another search. This time, they noticed something that had been overlooked before: a woman's jacket lying on the floor. It matched the one Megan had been wearing the night she disappeared. Lab tests later confirmed the presence of Megan's blood. Meanwhile, Sanchez's roommates provided disturbing accounts of his behavior on the night of July 4th. After celebrating the holiday, they went to bed, leaving Sanchez alone in the living room. When one roommate woke around 2 a.m., Sanchez was gone. Around 4 a.m., he was seen outside, aggressively scrubbing his pickup truck. By morning, the truck's interior had been shampooed, and a fresh scratch was visible along the side. The timing was impossible to ignore. Faced with overwhelming evidence, Sanchez eventually confessed to assaulting multiple women. He admitted to stalking his victims, researching their personal lives, and planning his attacks carefully. However, when questioned about Megan Barroso, he refused to confess. He claimed he had nothing to do with her disappearance. Investigators did not believe him. A friend of Sanchez told police that he had once mentioned a nearby canyon as a perfect place to hide a body. Acting on that information, authorities organized a massive search. Nearly 3,000 volunteers joined officers in combing the rugged terrain. Search dogs eventually led investigators to a small ravine off a remote trail. At the bottom, they found human remains. Due to advanced decomposition, identification was difficult. However, a ring found on the victim's hand matched one Megan was known to wear. Dental records later confirmed the remains belonged to Megan Barroso. The medical examiner determined that Megan had been shot once in the abdomen. The wound was not immediately fatal. However, the condition of the remains made it impossible to determine the full extent of what she endured after being abducted. One detail, however, stood out. Megan was wearing underwear that did not belong to her. Investigators knew Sanchez had forced other victims to wear underwear he provided, reinforcing the belief that Megan had been sexually assaulted before her death. Further forensic analysis revealed glitter inside Sanchez's truck. The same rare hexagonal glitter, used at the party Megan attended, was found in her hair, on her jacket, and on the AK-47. The microscopic match strengthened the prosecution's case. On August 10, 2001, Vincent Sanchez was charged with 62 criminal counts, including the sexual assaults of at least 13 women and the murder of Megan Barroso. During court proceedings, Sanchez attempted to plead guilty to Megan's murder, but the judge rejected the plea due to technical issues. He refused to specify the degree of murder or acknowledge aggravating factors, both of which were required for sentencing. As a result, the case proceeded to trial. The defense did not argue innocence. Instead, they claimed that Sanchez had not intended to kill Megan. Prosecutors countered with a mountain of forensic evidence, witness testimony, and expert analysis. The jury was unconvinced by the defense's arguments. In 2003, Vincent Sanchez was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death. 3 years later, California imposed a moratorium on executions. Sanchez's sentence was converted to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Today, he remains behind bars, where he is expected to spend the rest of his life. For Megan Barroso's family, justice brought little comfort. They lost a daughter, a sister, and a young woman whose life had barely begun. Her death left a permanent scar on the community and served as a grim reminder of how vulnerable ordinary moments can be. The case of Megan Barroso stands as a chilling example of calculated violence carried out by a predator hiding in plain sight. It also highlights the importance of persistence in investigation and the courage of survivors who came forward. Though Vincent Sanchez was finally stopped, investigators have never ruled out the possibility that there may have been more victims, women who never had the chance to tell their stories. Megan Barroso's story, however, will not be forgotten.